But then last year I read the biography, which I would recommend to everyone in this room, of Pyotr Wrangel, who was the leader of the revolutionary white forces during the Russian Revolution, the Civil War, rather, that came after the revolution. And he was a Baltic German living in Russia and a general, worked for the Tsar. The war ends, or Russia ceases its hostilities with Germany. He comes back to St. Petersburg, and the country's in complete chaos. And the Bolsheviks have decided that, you know, it's discontent within the army that we need to inflame, and we need to get the army. I don't know if this sounds familiar to anyone here, but get the guns and the people who wield the guns. We need them. So the first thing they do is destroy all discipline in the Tsar's army, complete. So Pyotr Wrangel's just been on the front for 4 years. He comes back into St. Petersburg, totally civilized city, 2-hour drive from Helsinki. I mean, it is Europe, okay? Whatever anyone tells you. And he's wandering through, and soldiers are going crazy in the streets. And they're raping women, they're stealing at gunpoint. Soldiers in uniform, in a monarchy which had not had any behavior like this at all. And Pyotr Wrangel just can't even believe it. These are his soldiers, he's a general. And so he's completely freaked out, and he goes into a movie theater, and everyone in the movie theater is completely absorbed in the movie. Like there's no revolution happening outside. And Pyotr Wrangel thinks these people are insane. So he goes back, he's like, I gotta get to Moscow. So he takes the train to Moscow. I have to tell the Tsar, this country's falling apart. He's very close to the Romanovs, the family. You should read this. It's just out in English translation in the last 3 years. It's an unbelievable book, lost to history until recently to English speakers. So he goes back to Moscow, and he's close to the Romanovs. And so he goes into the imperial court, and he knows all the relatives, and there are millions of them, hangers-on. And he notices about 80% of the women in the Romanov family are wearing red ribbons in solidarity with the Bolsheviks, who wound up, of course we know how it ends, murdering them in the basement at dawn. So, wait, what? Pyotr Wrangel says, how is it that this country is being devoured by a violent revolution, and the people who can afford movie tickets, that is kind of our middle class, are refusing even to acknowledge that it's happening, and the ruling class, against whom it is aimed, are sympathizing with it. And if this doesn't remind you of BLM, I don't know what does. I'm reading this in my porch, like midnight, I couldn't go to sleep. I was like, wait, I live in that country. That's happening now. This is a revolution. Its aim is to hurt you. Yes, that would include physically in the end. Sorry. If someone tells you you're not allowed to speak, if someone tells you your children are not your children, okay, these are not ideological differences. This is not, oh, I prefer, you know, this capital gains rate. These are totalitarian measures that treat you as non-human. Human beings, free citizens, get to say what they think. Slaves must be quiet. That's the distinction. So all this like, oh, it's in the First Amendment. No, yeah, it precedes the First Amendment. As our founding documents make clear, these are natural rights that distinguish the citizen from the slave, the human from the subhuman. We can't consider slaves fully human, or we wouldn't enslave them. So anyone treating you as a slave considers you less than human. People don't pause to consider the implications of this. If someone says to you, I have a right to make your children hate you, or to say weird, creepy sex stuff to your kids, what's a valid response to that? Well, in a healthy society, if someone says weird, creepy sex stuff to your 8th grader, you get your gun. Like, try that in Bulgaria. How do you think that's gonna work? I mean it, too. Oh, you're calling for violence? Yeah. You try and sexualize my children? What? Those are my children. That's totally not allowed. Nothing like that is allowed. And I don't care if you claim you're a teacher or an administrator, you work for some creepy Soros-backed NGO. If you're trying to sexualize my children, I go right to force. And if I can't do that, I'm not really their father, am I? I'm serious. And I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of in that. And no, I'm not calling for, I'm calling for applying natural law to American life. And if you refuse to do that, what happens? Well, we're watching what happens. They become increasingly aggressive.